The story begins not in a library, nor in a lecture hall, nor in the quiet corners of a European university. It begins along the coast of West Africa, where the warm Atlantic wind moves across the shores of Axim and the kingdom of Nzima. Here, centuries ago, a child was born who would one day walk into the heart of Europe and challenge the very foundations of philosophy. His name was Amo. He would become Anton Wilhelm Amo, the first African known to earn a doctorate in philosophy in Europe. A man whose intellect rose above prejudice, above colonial ignorance, above the limits placed upon him. A man who stood before kings, universities, scholars, and skeptics, and proved that genius has no homeland. But before he became one of the sharpest minds of the Enlightenment, he was a child taken across the ocean, and this is where the journey begins. Amo was taken from his homeland at a young age during the era when European powers carved Africa into trade routes and profit. But unlike the countless children stolen into slavery, his path veered unexpectedly. He was presented not as property, but as a symbolic gift to the court of the Duke of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel in Germany. In that strange, cold land far from home, the child who spoke Nzima suddenly found himself surrounded by the German language, European customs, and the glitter of royal halls. Most children in his position would have vanished into silence, ignored and forgotten, but not Amo. The court noticed something unusual about him, a quickness of thought, a sharp curiosity, an intelligence that refused to be hidden. He listened, he observed, he learned. Soon, he could speak German, then Dutch, then French, eventually Latin and Greek, the languages of philosophy, science, and law. Massive libraries surrounded him, and he devoured them. He did not simply survive Europe, he mastered it. Germany in the early 1700s was a world of ideas. Universities buzzed with arguments about reason, science, religion, and the rise of enlightenment. It was a time when scholars questioned everything, even the nature of the human soul. Into this world stepped a young African scholar whose brilliance could not be dismissed. Amo was sent to study at the University of Halle, one of Europe's most respected centers of learning. There, professors watched with astonishment as the young man from Africa debated Latin texts, corrected flawed translations, and developed arguments with precision that rivaled the top European minds. Students gathered around him not because he was different, but because he was extraordinary. Amo soon earned a degree in philosophy, then another in law, then a doctorate, a level of achievement almost unimaginable for an African in Europe at that time. He did what no one expected. He became a professor. Amo stood before lecture halls filled with European students, his robes flowing, his voice calm and confident. He lectured on logic, metaphysics, mathematics, philosophy of the mind. He debated questions such as, what is thought? What is the soul? How does the body perceive the world? What is justice? What is freedom? One of his most famous works challenged the idea that the human mind could feel pain. A radical thought at the time, he argued that pain belonged to the body, not the thinking mind. This idea sent waves through European philosophy. It contradicted well-known thinkers like Descartes, and yet Amo defended it with such clarity and depth that his peers were forced to listen. For the first time, Europe witnessed an African scholar shaping the future of Western thought. He was no novelty, no court curiosity, no exotic attraction. He was a philosopher, one respected for the power of his mind. But the Europe that applauded him was also the Europe that enslaved millions of Africans. Praise would soon turn to envy, and admiration to resentment. Whispers began to spread. This African is too brilliant. He does not know his place. He outshines European scholars. Racism tightened around him, a storm cloud. Satirical pamphlets mocked him. Students he once taught mocked him behind his back. Some universities grew uncomfortable, having a black professor outthinking their entire faculty. And Europe was changing. Ideas of scientific racism were beginning to spread, lies used to justify slavery and oppression. Amo watched as the continent that celebrated his genius began turning against him. He saw justice bent by prejudice. He saw reason poisoned by hatred. Eventually, he made a choice, a painful one. He would leave. After decades in Europe, after mastering their languages, philosophy, and sciences, after rising to intellectual heights almost no African had reached before him, Amo boarded a ship. Not as a slave, not as a curiosity, but as a scholar returning home. He arrived on the Gold Coast around 1747. He walked again on African soil. He breathed African air. He saw palm trees, his people, his land. But he returned as a different man, shaped by two worlds, accepted fully by neither. He spent his final years quietly among his people, carrying knowledge that had crossed oceans, survived prejudice, and reshaped parts of European philosophy. Some say he taught local students. Some say he withdrew into spiritual life. Some say he simply lived in peace, far from the noise of the world. When he died, he left behind a legacy too large for his time to understand. Today, Anton Wilhelm Amo is celebrated as the first African philosopher of modern Europe, a pioneer who broke barriers centuries before the world was ready. His writings are studied in universities. Statues of him stand in Germany. His name is woven into the story of the Enlightenment. He proved that the color of one's skin has no bearing on the depth of one's mind. He proved that Africa has always produced thinkers, scholars, scientists, and philosophers. And he proved that greatness cannot be caged by borders, oceans, or prejudice. Anton Wilhelm Amo walked into Europe as a child with no power, and left as a scholar who had influenced the intellectual world. His story is not simply the story of a philosopher. It is the story of resilience, of brilliance, of a mind too powerful to ignore. And in the end, his voice still echoes across centuries, whispering one eternal truth. Knowledge knows no master, wisdom chooses no color, and truth belongs to all mankind.
If you love discovering the stories they never taught in school, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this journey because history deserves to be heard.